So Eddie Hearn has been sending some sly shots at Frank Warren about this Conor Benn, David Avanesyan situation. Obviously, Frank Warren is really pushing hard for Avanesyan to fight Conor Benn. And Eddie Hearn has made no secret of the fact that he doesn't believe his fighter Benn is ready for Avanesyan right now. Keeps saying that he needs a couple more fights, but he was saying that a couple fights ago. And Conor Benn's recent performances have been dominant, so shouldn't he be ready now? Eddie Hearn's excuses seem to be evolving a little bit at this point, where he's saying that Avanesyan isn't well known enough. The fighters he's looking at, opponents should I say, for Conor Benn, are the likes of Adrian Broner, Robert Guerrero, and these people are definitely more well known than David Avanesyan. And he also talked about the fact that, or he was asked about the fact that Frank Warren is willing to pay Avanesyan's purse, so that he's basically going to get a free opponent for Conor Benn. And Eddie Hearn again responded with these sly digs by saying that no, he would want Avanesyan to get paid properly and sharply. And we all know what that's about, right? So many fighters over the years, I mean, going back many, many years, have complained about not being paid promptly by Mr. Frank Warren. And again, there are many, many examples all over the internet which you can find. But Frank Warren, touche, responded by saying what? Paid promptly and sharply like Billy Joe Saunders, yeah? Because Billy Joe Saunders did come out a couple weeks after the Canelo Alvarez fight and said that he hadn't been paid or something like that. It seemed to have been sorted out very, very quickly. Eddie Hearn was asked about it and he said he didn't really know what it was all about, and that I think the payment went to MTK or something. That's Billy Joe Saunders' management. And I don't know, was he trying to pass the buck and say it was MTK and their responsibility to, I don't know. It was all a little strange, but to be fair, Eddie Hearn has had very few of those accusations over the years. Frank Warren has had numerous accusations like that leveled at him publicly. So I can, it's not me saying anything slanderous here. These were public accusations that various different fighters have leveled at Frank Warren. So yeah, the Conor Benn Avanesyan fight doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon, if ever. Conor Benn is a potential cash cow pay-per-view fighter for Eddie Hearn right now, and he is picking his fights very carefully. And as I've said previously, Conor Benn is being managed very well. He's been brought on at a good pace. The way they're stepping him up is very good. And I heard Eddie Hearn giving himself a big pat on the back a couple IFL interviews ago, basically saying the same thing, that they've managed Conor Benn almost to perfection up to this stage, giving him the exact type of step-ups at the exact right time that he needs to develop as a fighter. Because people say that Conor Benn is protected, but he hasn't just been fed cream puffs the whole way. He hasn't just been given easy opponents the whole way. They have been trying to improve him and challenge him. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't have put him straight back in a couple fights later with that Payno guy, the French guy that dropped him the first time, on several occasions during the fight. It was a wild fight. They put him right back in with that guy. You see, that is clearly a team that are trying to improve their fighter, not just feeding him cream puffs, building up an inflated record, and then cashing him out in a world title fight, right? No, they are genuinely trying to improve him. Now, some of the things that Eddie Hearn says in this interview, at least I take with a pinch of salt, whereby he's saying that Conor Benn will be ready for the likes of Jerome Ennis and Virgil Ortiz in what? Two, he said he's only about 2 fights behind him. I think that Conor Benn, 2 fights behind Jerome Ennis. I mean, how far is he behind Jerome? I think he's so far behind Jerome Ennis that it's insurmountable. If Conor Benn had started boxing at the age of 10, because I think he started boxing relatively late, although, he would have been training with his dad and whatever a long time before he had an amateur bout, and his amateur career was relatively short. But if he'd been fighting as an amateur from the age of 12 and had hundreds of amateur bouts, I still wouldn't think that he'd ever be on the level of Jerome Ennis. I think Ennis is just far more talented than Conor Benn will ever be. He's a much bigger guy. Conor Benn, I'm still not convinced is a proper welterweight. he's doing very well at the moment. You know, he's fighting welterweights and whatever, but yeah, I just think Jerome Ennis will always be on a different level to Conor Benn. But that's my opinion. It's the great thing about boxing. Opinions really don't matter. Everybody's got an opinion. Some people's opinions prove to be more accurate over the years than others. But ultimately, the only thing that matters is what takes place in the ring. And so Conor Benn obviously shouldn't listen to the doubters, right? Who say that he'll never be as good as Jerome Ennis. He should throw that in the bin and say, no, I'm better than Jerome Ennis. That's how I would expect Conor Benn to think. That's how he should be thinking. You know, but me not being Conor Benn, me being somebody who is watching Conor Benn's career and observing Jerome Ennis's career, just looking at it impartially, from my perspective, I just don't think that Conor Benn will ever be on that level. And as far as Virgil Ortiz, I think Conor Benn's got a better chance of reaching that level. Obviously, I believe that Jerome Ennis is better than Ortiz. So I think Conor Benn's got a better chance of reaching that level than he has Jerome Ennis's level. But, you know, there you go. That's my view. And really and truly, if you think, getting back to Eddie Hearn now, if you think that Conor Benn is only a couple fights behind the likes of Ortiz and Ennis, then you would be taking the Avanesyan fight. So that's typical promoter talk from Eddie Hearn right there. Hype talk. He doesn't genuinely believe Conor Benn's only a couple fights behind those guys. He might be 10 fights. Realistically, right? If you're talking about behind them in terms of development or talent, or are you talking about behind them in terms of when you would be willing to put them in there, or put Conor Benn in there with those guys? I don't think either would be true. I don't think Eddie Hearn would be willing to put Conor Benn in there with Jerome Ennis or Ortiz in his next two fights. No way. So yeah, just promoter talk there, in my view, from Eddie Hearn. But it's entertaining for us to see Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren go back and forth like this. But it is bizarre, isn't it? That they've never been in a room together and they've still never had a conversation. They're the two biggest promoters in the UK, and they've done quite a few fights, right? They've had several Frank Warren fighters fight Eddie Hearn fighters, but they've never spoken. And because we were all waiting for the Billy Joe Saunders, Demetrius Andrade fight to take place. We all really wanted that fight to take place, not just because we wanted to see what would happen between the fighters, but we wanted to see Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn on the same table at the press conference. So many of us are looking forward to that. It just seems so bizarre that they've never been in the same room together. And obviously there was that meeting, right? They were supposed to have lunch or whatever to discuss matchups between their two camps. And Eddie Hearn basically stood Frank Warren up and hasn't gone in that direction after saying that he would. So you guys make of that what you will. Is he not as confident in his fighters as Frank Warren is in his? Or has he had a word with the old man Barry, who said that's not really good from a strategic point of view because we're doing so much better than Frank Warren? Why would we give him the opportunity to catch us up? Because if you put all your fighters against Frank Warren's fighters in a series of shows, all of the attention that Matchroom normally get is now going to be on Frank Warren as well. And if his fighters end up winning those fights, then in a short space of time, potentially, the balance of power could shift towards Queensbury. You see it? So maybe Eddie Hearn had a change of heart. Maybe he was never serious to begin with, and it was all just hype talk. You know how promoters are. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Are you still disappointed that Eddie Hearn will not take this Conor Benn fight for, this Avanesyan fight for Conor Benn? How do you think Conor Benn feels about it? I'm sure Conor Benn probably wants to fight Avanesyan, right? He's a very bullish, confident character. But to be fair, you know, Frank Warren being fair to Eddie Hearn here, he said that if he was promoting Conor Benn, he'd do the same thing. And he wouldn't allow Conor Benn to fight David Avanesyan. And indeed, Eddie Hearn suggested that a couple of Frank Warren fighters face each other. Was it Avanesyan against Esserman? I think it was Avanesyan against Esserman. And I think he said that Esserman's basically not ready for that fight. He's fighting at European level or whatever. So it's the same kind of thing, right? Swings and roundabouts. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about it all in the comments.